Hello everyone and welcome to week number 8. This week we're focusing on orthopedics and the musculoskeletal system. This week we will have 2 chapters again to focus on. Those are chapter 24 and chapter 37, pages 847 to 849. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a closer look at each of those. So chapter 24 will focus on the musculoskeletal system and orthopedics. Orthopedics is the prevention or treatment for conditions of the musculoskeletal system or the bones and muscles of our body. 2 types of therapists that we might work with are orthopedics and rheumatologists. The musculoskeletal system is made up of muscles within your body. Muscles actually make up about 42% of a patient's total body weight. So that's almost half of our whole body weight is muscles. Muscles are composed of 75% water, 20% protein, and 5% of carbohydrates, lipids, inorganic salts, and non-protein components. The muscle fibers are held together by connective tissues, and that connective tissue is held together by a fascia or fibrous sheath. Now, when we start talking about muscles, they serve many different functions within our bodies, but the 6 main ones are movement, stability, circulation and respiration, heat production, and digestion and elimination. When we talk about movement, that is almost every movement that the body does, and that's attributed to our muscle contractions, either by voluntary or involuntary movement. Voluntary movement is the most understandable function of the muscular system because this is what we use to walk, stand, sit, smile, wink, all of the things that we can physically move on our own. Involuntary movement is what happens without our control. For example, when our heart beats or when our smooth muscle makes our digestive tract carry food through it. Those are things that we cannot consciously control, but it is part of the muscles and that's a function of the muscle. Stability is the body's ability to maintain posture through continual partial contraction of your skeletal muscles. So the muscular and skeletal systems work together here to provide the body with stability. It's our way to stand up and keep ourselves upright. Circulation and respiration go together. This is when the heart will provide the circulation for our blood throughout our bodies, and that provides oxygen and nutrients to our system. Respiration is controlled by a muscle movement, which helps our bodies to breathe. Again, we don't necessarily tell that to happen, it does it involuntarily. Heat production is when your muscles produce heat through chemical changes in their muscular contractions. So this helps us to maintain what we call homeostasis and regulate our normal body temperature. And lastly, elimination and digestion. This is the involuntary act of your smooth muscles in your GI tract to help transport food through the stomach and the intestines, and then obviously out of the body through fecal or urine matter. So now that we have an understanding of the functions of the muscles, let's discuss the types of muscles that we have. When we start talking about muscles, we need to know that they have energy that they use for production. So energy from our muscles come in the form of 2 types. It comes in one type, ATP, which then actually is broken down into 2 parts, either an aerobic production or an anaerobic production. The aerobic production is when we have oxygen present, and anaerobic is when there is no oxygen present, but instead it uses our glucose that we keep stored. That's also known as glycogen. What happens with this type is that it actually takes that energy and it uses it for small bursts of energy rather than endurance, where the aerobic production actually has energy that we use for endurance. So, when we start talking about the muscular system, I'm going to back up just a minute here. Some things that I didn't talk about on this slide are the different types of muscles that we have, and we have 3 types of muscles in our body. We have smooth muscles, skeletal muscles, and cardiac muscles. Smooth muscles are also called our involuntary muscles. They are elongated, spindle-shaped cells, and they can be found in your respiratory tract, urinary system, digestive system, and even in our blood vessels. Skeletal muscles are called our voluntary or striated muscles. They perform skeletal movements because they attach to bones of our body. Any movement performed by this muscle is consciously controlled. And lastly, your cardiac muscle. These are muscles found in your heart, obviously. Cells of this network have branching off fibers that help to control the heart itself. Alright, so now that we have discussed the muscular system, we also need to discuss the skeletal system and how they work together. So as I already stated, when we talked about the different types of muscles, the skeletal muscle attaches to bone, and that's called our voluntary control. There are more than 600 different skeletal muscles that are responsible for the movement of our body. Those can be through contraction, extension, or elasticity. When muscles perform in groups, they're classified into one of 3 categories. They're either called a prime mover or an agonist, an antagonist, or a synergist. If a muscle that moves is the primary actor, it's given the movement of prime mover. So this is a muscle that produces the movement in a muscle contraction. An antagonist is a muscle that counteracts or opposes the action of another muscle. And a synergist is a muscle that acts with another muscle. Most commonly, they hook up with the prime movers to produce some sort of movement. Alright, so that will bring us to the end of chapter 24. We're going to move on to chapter 37 now, which really talks about your role in helping to explain what medical assistants do when they're assisting with orthopedics. So when you're working with orthopedics, you will be responsible for a few duties. First and foremost, just like any other type of system that you work in, you will be responsible for rooming your patients and obtaining vital signs and measurements. That includes height, weight, blood pressure, pulse, temperature, and respiration. You will review the patient's medical history and complete any appropriate forms that are needed and documentation related to their orthopedic conditions. You will schedule diagnostic tests and procedures, maybe if that's something that they have to have either done in the office or outside of the office. You'll be responsible for working with other professionals such as physical therapy and occupational therapy, or more commonly known as PT and OT. You will provide patient education and support on their treatment plans. You will apply therapeutic modalities as necessary, as well as applying heat or cold packs. Maybe you might be responsible for placing a cast or a finger splint or something to that effect. That might be something that you get to do as well. And lastly, you may be responsible for obtaining x-rays or other diagnostic images to aid in the diagnosis and treatment of a patient's condition. Some common disorders that you might see and hear of are atrophy, fibromyalgia, a ganglion cyst, Lyme disease, muscular dystrophy, or myasthenia gravis. I'm going to leave this up to you guys to review. It's in your books, but I will also post the PowerPoint so you can take a look at these as well. Another set of common disorders that you'll hear of are rotator cuff tears, shin splints, sprains and strains, which are two that we see of most commonly, tendinitis, and tetanus. Not something that a lot of people feel that they would fall into this category, but tetanus does fall into it based upon how it responds and makes the body respond. All right, guys, so your homework for this week is, as always, please make sure that you are reading your chapter in full, especially that of 24. That's the main chapter that will be discussed in your discussion board and your quiz for this week. Plus, it will help you prepare for your lab classes this week. For your discussion board this week, we will be focusing on muscles and exercising. You'll need to discuss why exercise is so important for our muscles. And once you've discussed why exercise is important for our muscles, you will need to discuss what will happen to our muscles if we don't exercise. Please make sure, as always, that your discussion posts are written in your own words and that you have your initial post completed no later than Tuesday, November 22nd by midnight, with at least one reply post to your classmates completed Saturday, November 26th by midnight. Now, this week for your quiz, it will be a little different than those you've had in the past few weeks. Your quiz is composed of only 6 questions. 5 of those are not multiple choice. 5 of those are short answer essay questions, and then the last one will be a matching. This quiz will allow you 15 minutes to complete it, and it is due no later than Sunday, November 27th at midnight. If you have any questions or concerns, guys, please make sure that you're reaching out to me or emailing me, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week 8, and hang in there, guys. We're almost done. You've only got a few weeks left of this quarter. Bye, guys.